All right. Good evening, y'all. Going to call to order the Planning and Zoning Commission of the City of Howe at 6 p.m. There's a quorum present. Only 2 items on the agenda tonight. So the first one is to approve or discuss and approve the minutes from the last meeting on September 17th, 2024. Any discussion? No?
I'll make a motion that we approve those.
Okay. And a second?
Second motion.
All right, that's easy. All in favor? Here we go. Right, item number 2, discuss, consider, and act upon the final plat for Noble Ridge Phase 1B.
The plat has been reviewed by the engineers and approved by the engineers, and I think it's ready for approval. Yeah. I would recommend that.
Okay. Questions? No?
I'll make a motion, we accept.
Got a second?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor? Here we go. All right, and that calls to order at the meeting at 6:01 p.m.
Good evening. There being a quorum present, this regular session of the Howe City Council is hereby called to order on Tuesday, October 15, 2024 at 6:03 p.m. under the Open Meetings Act of the state of Texas. If you will, please remove your hats and silence your cell phones, and let's stand for the prayer and the pledges. Heavenly Father, we just humbly come to you today and thank you for all of our many blessings. We ask that you will be with us during this time as we make decisions for the city of Howe. Give us wisdom and discernment and knowledge. It's all, we ask for all these things. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. And now for the prayers, or the pledges. The American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now for the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Thank you, and please be seated. The City and Council invites citizens to speak to the Council on topics not already scheduled for public hearing or on the agenda. Citizens may address the Council for a maximum of 2 minutes. The Council is unable to respond to or discuss any issues that are brought up during this section that are not on the agenda, other than to make a statement of specific factual information in response to a citizen's inquiry or to recite existing policy in response to this inquiry. I did not receive any comment forms. Are there any comment forms that citizens have not turned in? Okay. We'll move on to comments, mayor comments this week, Monday through Sunday. Connections Park is having their community build to construct the playground. This park is located at 517 Bandera Drive, which is the first street east of Castlegate. If you would like to help, they're still looking for volunteers. Specifically, they are in need of volunteers for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. If you would like to volunteer, they ask that you go to their Facebook page and sign up through their Facebook page, but if you do not have access to the internet, you can let myself know or one of the council members here, and we'll be happy to get you connected. Monday, October 21 at 9 a.m. here in Summit Gardens, we will have a swearing-in ceremony for our new police chief, Jake Sullivan, as well as 2 additional new officers. We hope everyone who can attend will do so. This is a great opportunity to get to know our new officers. We're very excited to welcome Chief Sullivan, Lieutenant Sparks, and Officer Beans. Is it Beans? Beans, excuse me. Early voting starts the same day. Get out and vote. Let your voice be heard. Monday, October 28th, from 6 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. is our annual downtown Halloween Festival. The festival provides an opportunity for vendors to promote their businesses and trick-or-treating for the kids. If you or your business or organization would like to participate in this event, please reach out to the Howe Chamber of Commerce. Next item is Tuesday, November 5th, Election Day. Saturday, December 14 at 4:30 p.m. is our annual Christmas parade. Now is the time to start planning for your floats. We encourage businesses, churches, and other organizations to participate. And as always, the first Wednesday of every month, we have a Howe Hump Day breakfast here in Summit Gardens from 8 to 9 a.m. It's a great opportunity for businesses to connect with each other and do some networking. Consent items. These items consist of non-controversial or housekeeping items that are required by law. Items may be considered individual by any council member making such request prior to a motion and vote on the consent items. 1, discuss, consider, and act upon consent items which are marked by an asterisk. They are minutes of regular council meeting September 17, 2024, bills being paid for the month, detailed check register report, statement of revenue and expenditures, independent financial, secure deposits September 30, 2024, recap and standings September 20, 2024, ratify agreement with Grayson County and City of Howe for fire protection. Does the council wish to discuss these items? And if they do not, do we have a motion to approve?
I want to discuss just a couple things on the bills being paid for the month. Mr. Walker? Bobcat Lawn and Tree Farm for the mowing service. What exactly is that for?
That is the contract that was signed 2 years ago on a monthly basis for lawn mowing that we are looking at trying to eliminate. We did eliminate it from the budget. We got our public works director tells us that we do not need that service anymore now that we've got a full staff. But before we cut it off, I need to make sure that we still have the manpower to do that. So,
How long do we have on that? Is it a year?
we can give a 60-day notice, so we're going to do that very quickly.
Okay. Mayor, that was
Okay.
my only question.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the council? If not, do we have a motion to approve the consent items?
I'll motion to approve.
Sean makes a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Sarah makes a second. All in favor, show of hands, please. Everyone is in favor. Any opposed? None are opposed. Moving on to discussion items. We will have our presentation by BVRT2 regarding wastewater treatment services and an opportunity for the public to have questions, ask questions, and receive answers from BVRT2. After BVRT2 gives their presentation, there will be this opportunity for the public as well as the council to ask these questions. I'd also like just to mention that currently we are in negotiation for the land, so we are not going to be discussing the location of a wastewater treatment plant because we're not allowed to, because we're in negotiation. All right. So, Mr. Caldwell, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. So my name is Jeff Caldwell. I'm here on behalf of BVRT2. We're here to talk a little bit about the services that we provide for communities. We work with small communities around Texas as well as developers to help assist with water, wastewater, and then water resource recovery, and reuse water also. And we've had some conversations with the city of Howe about helping out the situation that Howe's in right now. I'm going to go through some slides tonight. Unfortunately, we're a little limited on technical stuff, so I'm going to be over here a lot manipulating slides as we go through. Please feel free to ask questions. I don't know how you guys want to handle that, but I'm here tonight to answer questions as much as anything else. I think that's probably one of the most important features. I've got some information to share with you, but we want to make sure that your questions get answered. I'm going to jump right in. Did you have anything this week to say?
No, I don't. Thank you.
So who is BVRT2 and what do we do? So BVRT2 is a DFW-based investor-owned water resource utility company. So we have private investors that invest money in us putting in infrastructure for communities and developers. It's all investor-based. It's not through bond money. It's not through any of that kind of stuff. The BVRT and BVRT2 history, a little bit about that real quick. So BVRT and BVRT2 are kind of joined but separate companies. BVRT started in July of 2013. It's in the Central Texas area mainly. We have an investor down there. BVRT currently owns and operates 7 water treatment plants or water resource utility companies in Central Texas. So in some communities we do both wastewater and water. For some developers or MUDs we also do both water, wastewater. Some areas we just do water, some areas we just do wastewater. In the Central Texas area we serve just south of San Antonio up to just south of Austin. And there's a little over $250 million that BVRT has invested in infrastructure in that Central Texas area that's either existing or under construction at this time. So BVRT had a set of investors in the Central Texas area. We started moving into the DFW area about a year ago, talking to people, and the investor group that we were working with at that time decided that was a little bit too much, that they were already in $250 million in the Central Texas area, weren't able to really move forward in the Dallas area. So BVRT2 was formed in 2024, just a little bit earlier this year. It's the same founder, a lot of the same people that are involved, but it's a new investor, and this investor has committed a little over $500 million for infrastructure in the DFW and surrounding areas. These are just some of the relationships we have. So I said earlier that we work with communities. We also work with rural water corporations, special utility districts, different MUDs. We are a partner with, I think it's in here somewhere, with GBRA for bringing a water line over into the Caldwell Valley area down in Central Texas. So we also work with different developers, KB Homes, Horton, Meritage. So there's a lot of folks we've been partnered up with and we work with, both communities as well as private entities. This is just a representative map of some of the area that we're in Dallas and projects that we're in conversations with at this time. Nothing very specific, but just kind of representative of where we're working in the area. I'm sorry, can you guys see this or am I standing in your way? Okay. So why partner with BVRT2? So you guys are probably all familiar with this, council in particular, city staff in particular. The rapid growth in Texas has been phenomenal. It's outpaced traditional models for public financing. So the traditional models are very cumbersome to do. The growth has outpaced that, and there's not enough resources and infrastructure for most small communities to keep up with that. And even if they're able to try to somewhat keep up with that, it's hard to stay out in front of that. There's just not the resources to do that. So we overcome those constraints by using this private money to be able to put the infrastructure in and create these resources and operate these resources for communities. In most cities, what you see the big constraint is when I'm trying to do a project in a city, and you've probably seen this, when I'm trying to do a project inside the city, what happens is in year one, I go in and I start designing a project. I start building a budget around that project. And then in year two, I start looking for the financing around that. So I start going out looking for bonds or whatever else I'm going to do to finance that project. In year 3 or 4, I go out and I get those bonds and I begin looking at what it's going to take to bid that project out. And usually by about year 4 or 5 is when I'm actually bidding this project out. And at that time, when the bids come back, what most communities, we found this in our community as well, what most communities see is they're about 50% low from that projection that was done 3 or 4 years ago, just in construction costs that have increased over that amount of time. And what every community has to do at that point is they have to make a very, very important decision. They either have to put cash in to keep the project going, or they have to downsize the project. And for most communities, they don't have the cash in, and so they end up downsizing the project. And what happens is the minute you build that project, you're already behind the curveball again. Now, one of the things that happens with that is that as cities are going through that process, they can go back out and try to get other money and go back for more bonding money. But again, it's a very time-consuming process. So as an example of that, it generally takes a city, if you were going to start today to build a wastewater treatment plant, it's probably going to be about a 5-year process. Maybe you get it done in 3, but say 3 to 6 years. For BVRT, because we're using private money and we're able to move a little bit quicker, when we're working with a community or a developer and we're putting in a plant, we can have a plant from the time we sign a contract with somebody up and running and ready for connection in about 18 months. So it's a vast difference. Now here's the other important point for the community here. What happens in that time frame also of 5 years is you're losing all of that development money that would have come in during that time. So you're losing property tax and you're losing sales tax. By getting that infrastructure in place quicker, that development can take place and that tax money can come into the tax rolls. One of the other things I always talk about is one of the great things about using something like this is we are not in competition with the city for tax money. All of what we do is paid for out of the ratepayers, and I'll go into that a little bit more here in just a little bit. But we're not competing with the city for the dollars that they so desperately need. In fact, and I'll talk about this later, we can actually provide some ways for them to get revenue out of this. So growth across much of Texas is explosive. It's just going nuts. And you guys are seeing it, especially up in the DFW area, where I'm hearing of just massive growth in some of the very, very small communities as it's spreading. You know, a typical town, I would look at probably about 12 to 20 new house permits a month. And what I've seen in a couple of communities up here is as many as 200. And so it's just massive growth. There's a real and urgent need for communities to have sustainable water resource recovery, and recycled water resources to ensure economic and environmental vitality of the community. Again, when we come into a community, what our goal is to partner with you. It's not to take over anything or kick anybody out, it's to partner. So we have some communities, for instance, where we may go in and we put in a wastewater treatment system. And then after we've been there a little while, we find out they may have some infrastructure needs around water. And often there's ways we can partner with them to help with that as well then. So once we're in a community, we're there to stay. We want to be a part of that community. Our plants are designed to be there for 40, 50, 60 years. We want to be a part of that community. We will have an office in that community. We will have staff in that community. We will be a viable part of that community. So again, we provide the resources and the infrastructure for water, wastewater, reuse services. We work collaboratively, again, with whoever we're going to be working with, whether it's the city. Oftentimes how we get involved in this is a developer comes to us and says, I'm trying to put a development in, the city's not able to accommodate what I need, would you be willing to step in and serve? And oftentimes they're trying to create a MUD or a municipal utility district. What I love about being a part of the BVRT team is I'm very, very passionate about small towns and community building for small towns. That is a big deal for me. Like I said, I served in a small town. I know a lot of the woes and the pains that happen for the small towns. And with BVRT, what they do is they allow me to come in and work with the small communities to do more of community building. And what I love to see is when we can come in, when a developer calls us, my first question is, have you met with the city? Yeah, they can't help us. Well, let's go back and talk to them again and see if we can help them. Let's see if we can partner with them and create something that works for everybody. we really do look for ways to create wins for both the community, the development process, the citizens, as well as for BVRT. One of the big things is that utilities take a lot of work, a lot of effort. There's a lot of expertise that's involved in that, particularly as that's progressing and the technology is advancing. And BVRT brings those skills and resources to be able to do that. And I should have said, there's some flyers over here on the table too for you guys if you want to take one tonight. On the front of it, just know there's a map on there. So one of the conversations we've had so far is that there's probably a need in the community to have a couple of treatment plants here, one to the north and one to the south of town. And so you'll see some arrows on there. I just want to say right up front, those arrows are not pointing to a specific property. They're just pointing to the north end of town and the south end of town. They're not additional growth in that area. So one of the things that we do when we build our plants, what you saw there is we have these tank systems. And one of the great things about our plant system is we can start small and just keep expanding that plant. So you can get a lot of capacity out of that plant site by just expanding those number of tanks that you have. So we start at a capacity that's needed. We're prepared very quickly to grow and adjust as the growth comes in. So again, that's one of the downsides a lot of times within the city government is when that next wave of growth comes in, we go back through that whole process of trying to decide how do we make this work and how do we expand this. For us, it's a pretty quick and easy system. For instance, when we build the tanks, they're built in 300,000 gallon increments. We start out with all the guts or the parts, 150,000 gallons a day, which will handle about probably close to 1,000 homes. But what we can do very quickly is put the guts into the next 150-gallon tank and bring that online very, very quickly without having to add more concrete structure. When we need to go to the next 300,000 gallon, then we build that next infrastructure there also. So part of what we're able to do is we can guarantee capacity as needed for current use and future growth. So we can move very, very quickly. As I said earlier, we can, on just building a plant outright, it's about 18 months for us. So from the time a developer says, hey, I'm ready to turn dirt, they're usually much longer than 18 months out for doing all the horizontal infrastructure they have to do to the first connection of the house. So we can always be out in front of that growth. The city would continue to own, maintain, and repair the current collection system. We would operate that system as part of this agreement, though, if they would like for us to do that. We don't have to, but that's what's on the table for discussion. And I should say all of this is on the table for discussion, so nothing's been decided at all. As new development occurs, BVRT2 would assume responsibility and ownership of new wastewater infrastructure, including the current lift station. So there's currently a lift station that needs to be probably replaced, but maybe repaired, but we would assume responsibility for that and take that on. BVRT2 would work with the city to conduct a study on the current inflow and infiltration issues on the existing collection system. So the current existing system is having some issues with inflow and infiltration. That's usually from stormwater. It can be from broken pipes, things like that. We would work to look at that, create a plan to be able to move that forward and figure out how to take care of that and what all that would entail. Some of that's probably over time going to get replaced anyhow with new development as pipes need to be upsized and extended out to these developments. So we would work again conducting a study for that to see what needs to happen. So the city retains authority for development agreements. Just because we walk in and we put a treatment plant in doesn't mean we take that over. The city still retains all the rights for development planning. What we like to do, though, is to be involved in that. Again, our goal is to become a partner with the community. And so as developments come in, they want to talk to the city about what's going to happen and how they're going to do that. We would love to be a part of that. We want to work with the city to plan and how that growth gets managed. BVRT will hold, so one of the things that we do in communities a lot of times when we come in is we acknowledge that there's a cost differential when all the system is operating well and the system is fully at capacity. So what BVRT2 has said is that they'll hold rates for existing customers at the current rate for 5 years. There will be increases from time to time after that. One, it's looking at what the plant is doing, what the costs are, and occasionally costs go up, electricity, chemicals, whatever it takes to run a plant. honestly, if you guys build a plant, you're going to be doing the same thing. You're going to struggle to actually hold rates at the same level for 5 years while you're trying to get caught up with that plant and the bonding money that's coming out of that. The city, again, retains the rate-setting authority, so you guys have some authority over how the rates get set and what those are and how they get moved and when they get moved. The anticipated rate after 5 years, across the state, what we see is utility bills that range from about $85 to about $100, and it's dependent upon the modeling that goes into the system for the area that it's in. Anticipated here is between about $85 and $95 after that 5-year period. Again, rates are reviewed and set by the Public Utility Commission, and adjustments typically occur in about a 3 to 5 year increment. So about every 3 to 5 years, we'll re-look at what the plant's doing, what's the cost of utilities, what's the cost of chemicals, and if there's an adjustment, that's when that takes place. So it's not like every year there's a rate increase. It's about a 3 to 5 year time frame usually. So considerations, as I was putting this all together, I thought, man, if I'm sitting in y'all's seats, what would I be asking me? So I've got a few of them here. I'm sure you guys have some more, right? But one is, isn't this just putting us back in the same situation we're already in with the city of Sherman? And this is what I would say about that. I think the city of Sherman has done a great job with what they've done in supporting some of the small communities around. But the city of Sherman has a responsibility to its citizens to take care of the city of Sherman, to make sure that capacity there is available for their growth, to make sure that they're on track to meet the needs of their city. The difference is that when we come into a community, we partner with that community to ensure that happens for that community. So it's not the same thing. We have a vested interest in helping you guys grow, helping you guys manage that growth, because it's the way that we're able to grow and that we're able to manage what we're doing. So it's a very, very different relationship. I say a lot of times we become very symbiotic with the city. Your future is our future, and our future is your future, and we have to work together to make all of that happen. So it's a very different situation. That's not knocking Sherman. Sherman really put themselves out to help a lot of small communities in the area. Now they're needing that capacity to ensure their growth in their community, and we need to, whether it's us or you guys doing it yourself, ensure that this community has that capacity as well to do that. So what if we disagree with a rate that's requested by BVRT2? I went over this a little bit earlier, but if we suggest a rate increase, the council gets to look through that, question those costs and those expenses, and see if there's anything in there that maybe has been misconstrued or misinterpreted, and have conversations about all of that. So we go through a process with the council anytime there's a rate increase to show. We have to prove up why that rate increase is. I said earlier, through the Public Utility Commission, it's not like you just get to tap profit on or pour money into your rates. You have to prove why you're charging those rates. And whether we do that or you guys do that, you guys would go through the same process. So, why will citizens inside the city limits be paying for customers that reside outside the city limits? So no. What happens is as development comes on, whether it's development that actually annexes into the city or it's development that stays outside the city limits, that development pays for that new cost to bring the capacity up to whatever it needs to be. The citizens are not paying for that inside the city limits, okay? Why would we let customers outside the city limits onto this system? So I get this question a lot. I actually get this a lot from MUDs as well. Like, hey, I don't want competition. I don't want anybody else on the system. Let me just have a system and do my own thing. Well, what happens is the system is like a lot of other things. As we can build the capacity of the system and build the customer base, it stabilizes the system. It creates a much better atmosphere for how that system works. And then the other piece, and this is pretty huge for the city, is if you are looking at future annexation moving out anywhere, you would like for those communities to already be built and based upon a system that's functioning the same as what you would want it to do. You don't want to have to go out and acquire somebody's plant and pay for all the bonding that went into that plant. So by putting people on a system, even if they're outside the city limits, you're setting yourself up for a very, very good situation for future growth if that occurs. How does this impact our bonding capabilities? So I get asked this a lot. Again, our money comes from private investors. It's not impacting the city's bonding capacity in a negative way at all. What it actually does is it gives you guys a leg up because you're not putting that infrastructure money in, so you're not taking bonding capacity to put into a sewer system that you could use somewhere else, whether it's for roads or other infrastructure that you need. So it does impact the city's bonding capacity, but not in a drain way. It's actually an adding to that capacity. So the other question I get asked a whole lot is, how does BVRT2 make money? And so the way BVRT2 makes money is what the Public Utility Commission allows for is that when a private investor puts infrastructure in, the cost of the plant, the cost of the lines, they're able to get a blended rate of return on that that averages somewhere in the area usually between 9 and 10%, maybe 11%, depending on what the bond ratings are and how those are going at the time. So what I hear from cities oftentimes is, wow, like I can go get bond money a whole lot cheaper than that. You can. I agree with that, 100%. And we go back to then that scenario I played at the very front of this. You go and you get bond money, you're in year 3 of doing a project, and by the time you get to the place where you're trying to bid that out, you're 50% below or more sometimes that I've seen, below what it's going to cost to do the project. The lost tax revenue, the increased cost of trying to do the project 5 years later, far outweighs the 9 to 11% that BVRT gets in return for that. There's a lot of lost cost opportunity in what the cities are trying to do with the old model of trying to bond things out. Again, our money's not really made in the operations. The operations are mainly a pass-through. There's, you look at the employees that you have, you look at the cost of trucks, whatever it is that you have to operate the plant, but it's a pass-through. So I think, let me see here. Yeah, so I have some contact information here also. Some of this is on the brochure as well. I'm just going to open it up to questions now, and if I need to step back on any of the slides, I'm happy to do that as well.
Is there state or federal money available to subsidize these things?
Great question. There is, and some cities will go after the state or federal money to try to do these types of projects. That's another one of those situations where what I've seen, and I've worked with a small city in the last couple of years that had the same deal where they were going for some federal money to do this, and they were in the same boat. It was taking 5 years to get this done, and by the time they got to the bidding process, they were more than 50% below what was going to happen there. And there's also still some money input into that from the city. That varies depending on the city. Now, what I will say is that oftentimes what they'll do is a combination thing of some loans and some grants, and sometimes some of the loan is forgivable. So there is some options to do that, but again, most of the time what I see is by the time you get to the end of that 5-year period and you do that, you're still downsizing your project to try to meet that budget that you were allotted, and you're right back to where you were at square one. You may be able to take care of the immediate need, but the minute the next growth spurt comes, you're way behind again. It does. It does, yeah. It's much quicker. I'm sorry? The water will not turn, well, we're not working on the water system. The water from the wastewater treatment plant that's being discharged will not turn orange and yellow. Yeah, we're not in conversations about any of the water stuff, just the wastewater stuff. But like I said, in the future, if there's needs or that we can help out with, we'd be interested in doing that. Okay.
So this will make us totally independent from Trump.
It would.
Correct?
Yeah, it would.
So what are we seeing from a city aspect that is hindering our growth by not having it? What are we seeing?
Monty, do you want to comment on that?
Can I answer the number one? Number one?
Go ahead.
We don't have a grocery store.
Well, as far as grocers and commercial activity, all of that is, it's kind of an order. You got to have rooftops to support those commercial demands, and the commercial, your grocers have to be able to get those numbers and maximize out what their profit's going to be. And if the population won't support it, they're not coming. What this will allow us to do is continue on with developments that'll attract those and attract the rooftops, which will then eventually turn into the commercial that we're all wanting. And 3 times a day. I've told this to many times. I hear, when are we getting a grocery store, from the time I wake up until the time I hit my head on the pillow, and I think you're number 3. So, but yeah, that by not doing, to answer your question, he summed it up, pretty spot on as far as the longer we wait, the more revenue we lose out on and the opportunities. If we're able to expedite this situation, we expedite the growth, we expedite the sales tax from those commercial developers, and we expedite those rooftops. We will be missing out on a lot if we wait 5 years. There's no question about that.
I mean, what will end up happening, what I've seen in small communities before, is sometimes we can get stuck in paralysis by analysis, right? And so there's this process of trying to make these decisions, and what happens is all the growth comes in around then, and it's not coming to the city. The tax dollars not coming to the city, but the people are still coming into the city.
Right now, we're at maximum capacity for sewer, which is why we're not really growing much more.
One thing I would just reiterate with what Monty said also is that, again, we're not in competition for those rooftop and sales tax dollars. That's all coming to the city, well, city, county, but we're not in competition for that in any way. We want to see you guys grow in the way that you want to grow and have that availability for those dollars.
So our first meeting, you might explain, we were in there for an hour and a half, and I got we all got the presentation of the rosy, beautiful day from this situation and this partnership. My question was, show me the rainy day. I need to see what it's going to look like on the rainy day. So if you'll kind of go over that for the audience and explain what those outfalls could be, what kind of rainy day situation we could be looking at.
So I'll be happy to do that, but I'm going to ask you, would you tell them what you heard? Would you tell them what you heard as far as the rainy days? What happened?
So I got a referral from you guys to call some other cities, in which I did. The only rainy day item that I got was some TCEQ paperwork wasn't filed perfectly, and that was corrected, and I think whoever worked on that is no longer with you guys. But that, I didn't hear a lot of, and speaking with the other cities, matter of fact, I was told by a number of them that you guys do what you said you were going to do. But again, I want to press a little bit to kind of get, you've always said to ask the hard questions, and I just want the public to know, is there any surprise to this?
Yeah, so again, there's not, and here's why. We make our living, we make our business off of coming into communities, whether it's cities or whether it's private developers, and providing utility service. We have a vested interest in seeing that works and that it's maximized for growth for us as well as the communities that we're serving. The rainy day issue he's talking about, we had a amendment to a permit that happened, and what should have happened is that should have been sent to the city first to give them a heads up. It had to be done, and the city knew that. The person that just slipped up and forgot to send it to the city sent it to TCEQ first, so TCEQ did what they did and sent out their notices, so the city heard about that from the TCEQ notification and not from us. That's not how we like to operate. Again, we're trying to operate in partnership with the city. We want to be very, very symbiotic with the city and all the growth that was happening within our system and within the community. My experience with BVRT and BVRT2 is when they say they're going to do something, they do something. There's one community in particular where we had a mayor, I think it may be one of the ones that you even talked to, and he even said to us a couple times over the time when we were kind of getting everything going and starting up in their community of, I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. I just keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. And after about a 2-year period, one of our, Stephen actually Greenberg, the founder, asked him, so what happened to the other shoe? He goes, it never dropped. You guys did everything that you told us you would do. And so in that community, we're actually doing water and wastewater in that community.
Jeff, could you talk a little bit about maybe what the difference is between your BVRT2's facility versus like a lagoon-type system?
Sure. So again, ours is a membrane reactor system, so everything that comes in goes into that. I'm going to see if I can back this up to that. Nope. So this is an example of one of our systems. Have any of you, so there's a couple different types of lagoon systems. The one in Sherman, I would call it a kind of a modified lagoon. It's just really big open tanks. It's not really a lagoon system. In the small community I was in, we had a true lagoon system, which was just huge football field size holes dug in the ground with a liner in them that all the effluent comes into. And really what's happening there is there's an evaporation and a bacterial process that's digesting everything down. Those tend to have a significant odor to them depending on which side of the wind you're on. This system, you can stand on this catwalk here and there's not really a smell to it. The smell, if you ever have one out of this, what I say it smells like is kind of a wet dirt smell. It doesn't smell like what you would think a plant smells like. So it's a very efficient system, and it's capable, like I said, of treating water down to water. We say drinking water quality. It's not potable water in the sense that we think of it from coming out of our system. There would be at least one more process that it would go through before it does that. But it is possible to get it to that very easily. So it is a very, very different system. It takes up much less space. Doesn't have the issues that you would have in the lagoon system also with in the heat of the summers, evaporation can cause issues in the lagoon system. In the real rainy seasons, the influx of rainwater into the system can have a drastic impact. Capacity in your lagoon systems, when you have to adjust for capacity, that's a very long-term project to either add in additional lagoons or figure out how. There are some things you can do in lagoon systems to add capacity without expanding the lagoon, but most of the time when you get to any significant capacity issue, you're adding lagoons in. Yep. So one of the things we're going to try and do is solve some of the I&I issues. The plant's able to take on some additional capacity. What TCQ, you may have to help me, Tim, with this one. This is an engineering question. But the TCQ lets you operate a plant typically at about 80% capacity. We're looking to do an expansion. But what that means is there is still some capacity in there. So you can handle those kind of issues on a limited basis. You can't handle them on an ongoing, all the time basis. And what would come into the plant, this plant footprint is very insignificant. What may be coming into the system could be significant. And so again, that's why we've got to do some more research and some study of what's happening with your I&I issues to see what size of capacity we have to start the plant at in order to take care of that I&I issue until it can be remedied. Simultaneously. Again, what we're anticipating, like on for the current users, is we would pour a 300,000 gallon plant, but it's probably only 150,000 gallon part of it that would need to be used for that. So if we had to up that, we have the ability to do that pretty quickly. Yep. Us. Yeah, that would be so we would acquire that permit. That falls on us. All the reporting to TCEQ, everything falls on BVRT2.
So then at any point, would the city be forced by BVR to make improvements to the system?
So again, we're in really preliminary talks about all of this. What we're wanting to do is try to find some ways to help with that. And what we don't know is until the study's done what the extent of that is. So I can't really speak to that in great detail. I can just say we're committed to trying to help solve the I&I issue for two reasons. One, the community needs it. Two, you don't want that taking up capacity in the plant that development could. So we're very committed to trying to help with that, but I don't know what the specifics of that would look like at this time. Yep.
I have another question. As far as when we're talking to developers, as we know, once this plant is open and operational, even before then, we will be facing significant growth, some that people can't even imagine here right now. But what I want to know is how this would affect impact fees, if the city has instituted sewer impact fees for developers, and what that would do. Do you have your own set of developer fees?
Good question.
Okay.
So, if we were taking on the sewer system, the city would not do an impact fee because they would not have that as an impact against them. What we do with new developments is we have what's called a guaranteed service charge. So as a private utility company, we can't actually collect impact fees. And again, our money goes for the infrastructure. Impact fees are typically trying to pay for the infrastructure or pay back the infrastructure to pay down the bonds. What the guaranteed service charge goes for, and it's a per LUE or per lot charge that the developer pays. What that does is so the minute you build a plant, for a new development, you have a revenue requirement to keep that plant alive. There's never enough connections initially to keep that plant alive. What the guaranteed service charge does is it goes into a separate account, and as operations take place on a monthly basis, there's a true up out of that account to the operations to meet that minimum revenue requirement to keep the plant active and alive. And then over time, it's possible those fees might go away in a development. Most of the time, what I see, though, is as the development grows, there's a need to expand the plant, and so the fees help, again, pay for that capacity on the new section of the plant to keep it alive until there's enough customers on there to support that. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Another question is, initially you need 6 acres for this, which includes the buffer zone. When you get to that point of needing to expand and add additional capacity, do you buy more land up front, knowing that going into it, like a situation we're in, or do you, at that point, try to purchase additional land in another location, or do you just outright buy more than 6 acres up front?
So we like to have 10 up front, but we can work with 6, but we like to have 10 up front. On that 10 acres, we can serve around 10,000 rooftops with the expansion of the plant. So there's a lot of room for expansion, especially if we end up putting 2 plants in, one in the north and one at the south. There's a lot of room for expansion currently. If the point where we needed to increase that, I said earlier, we generally like to look at plants and say, hey, about a 3-mile radius, maybe even a little bit smaller than that, depending on the topography, is what we would serve. So we would probably be looking at additional plant sites that would serve other areas. So it's, what we try to stay away from is in some of the really large cities and some of the really large plants, they start putting in these massive lines, 30, 36-inch lines. That takes up a lot of space in right-of-way. It's very, very expensive to put in, very cumbersome to maintain. We try to keep those line sizes a little bit smaller and the plant sizes a little bit smaller, still serving on that regional basis, though.
Another question is, hypothetically, if there is a MUD who wants to put in their own package plant, let's say at the south end of town, and we also want to obviously construct, let's say we partner with you guys. If we partner with you and you partner with another MUD, what's the timing issue? Do we get precedence because of our pressing need, or can you simultaneously work on both? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a great question because y'all's situation is pretty unique in that way. And so what we've proposed and talked about is that we would work on the north and the south plant simultaneously if the need arises on the south plant to start that. The north plant we already know there's a need for, right? So as soon as the south plant there's a need for it, we would start on that immediately as well. There's not a delay. In other words, we're not going to have to finish one plant to start the second plant in order to meet that need. I think that's a better way to say it.
Did you address the percentage that the city would get back?
I haven't. If you wanted, I didn't say the specifics. I just said that you guys would get a billing utility fee.
Okay. I don't know if you want to address that, but
It's up to you. I just didn't know if that was something that you guys wanted.
That's one of my questions, so you might as well answer.
Oh, okay, I might as well answer it then.
Yeah.
So typically what we do on the billing agreement is about a 4%. So of all the billing that goes out, you keep a 4% piece of that.
And so is that on just city limits, or is that outside in the ETJ?
That would include ETJ and even beyond the ETJ if you guys were doing the billing for us on that. Yep. So that's another pretty significant. So, man, this is one of the struggles I see small cities have all the time is all this is happening outside the city limits and there's zero revenue coming in from that, and yet there's still a drain on services for that. This is a way to, I'm not going to say you're making up for that 100% because the tax money off the rooftops would be the ideal, but it is a way to get something that helps out in the community to serve that need that's coming in from outside the community.
That was the money he was talking about earlier, about it would be able to come into the general fund.
Correct. Yeah, it does not have to go into an enterprise fund. So it's useful for you guys in any way that you want to use it. Roads, police officers, other infrastructure, whatever you wanted to do with it. Matching money for other grants, however you wanted to use it. Yes, ma'am.
The private money would allow earlier startup for the city. What would be the exit plan if the city decided to terminate a operational partnership with BPA?
Yeah, so the city does have an option to come in and buy out a plant if they wanted to do that. There's a process that's gone through to evaluate the value of the plant and the purchase of that, but it is possible. We would hope that we do a good enough job that we could be a part of the community for a very long time to come, but there is an option in there for that.
And then BVRT too would also, they would be operating the facility. So
Correct.
that would not be our public works. Correct?
Correct. Yes, that is absolutely true.
Employees as well, if that were to happen.
Right, if we were to buy them out. But if they're operating it, it does not.
That's a desirable plan.
An exit plan, yeah. What's the exit plan? And there is an exit plan there, yes. There is one there.
Which you can look at, if we're not having to use our city employees and it's not costing the city the money for retirement insurance in addition to the pay as well.
Well, it would be in the Central Texas area. So we have not established a plant up in the DFW area. As I showed on that map, we're in talks with a bunch of different places right now. Some of them are private developers, some of them are cities, but we do not have an established plant here. So we've been operating 7 of them down there from about 2013. So the closest city would probably be the city of Euland, just south of Austin.
I have a question. We have seasonal inclement weather, like inches of ice with this particular structure. How do you manage when we get an ice storm that shuts everything down for 4 or 5 days? Do you have will it ever freeze up and we don't have sewer?
It won't freeze up, and a lot of the operations, so we always have an operator available at site to take care of whatever needs to be done there, but a lot of the operations can actually be done through automated systemology in the computer as well, and can be monitored that way. But no, it won't freeze up.
Mr. Seagroves, as we met the first time and I asked the same question, since they're expanding here in the DFW area, I asked him for the guinea pig rate. So we'll see if we get that.
The other thing is, you touched on this a little bit about there would be an operator on staff 24/7. So that means if the city did have there was an emergency, someone is available 24/7.
Absolutely, and if we enter into an agreement with you to maintain your collection system, they would be available for that as well.
Okay.
So, now, I will say that sometimes on repair work, we will subcontract that out. So we don't necessarily have everybody that's going to come out with a backhoe and dig something up and repair it. We would manage all of that and take care of that, but we may contract some of that out. Okay. Mm-hmm. I just want to be upfront about all that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
This may be a getting in the weeds kind of conversation or a question, but when you say you're going to rehab some of these I&I issues, we're an old community that we have clay sewer lines. When you do your rehab, how do you see that? Is that a replacement of the clay lines with new infrastructure? You might want to talk about that a little bit.
So what I'll say is I can't specifically say what we would do here without seeing the study and us having the engineers evaluate it. What I will say is that what would be available, sometimes there may be some repairs that can be done. Sometimes there's replacement that has to be done. There's a couple different ways to even do replacement. Sometimes it's digging it up and putting a new pipe in. There's also technology that I think you guys have clay pipes here, where there's some technology to be able to run some substances through that pipe that actually forms a new pipe and basically just takes the place of that clay pipe in place. So there's options. I don't know which options would be used specifically here for these I&I issues. And some of your issues are, I would guess, I don't know this, but some of your issues are probably not just related to pipes, but to manholes and dilapidated structures around those as well. So I don't know exactly what all would be. Some of those may be able to be repaired. It just, without doing the study, I can't give specifics on that.
I have a few questions.
Sure.
Why did you approach the city of Howe to work with us? Was it a developer, or how did you hear about us?
So when I first came up here, which has been about a year ago, it was because we were actually meeting with some of the Sherman folks, and we knew there were some issues with the current systemology and what was happening there. And so we thought that we might have a solution to help with that. And oftentimes that's where I approach, is small communities that I know are having a struggle, to see if we might be a fit to help with that. But that's how I first got involved.
What would the impact be to our staffing in Public Works because I think a big part of our Public Works job today is taking care of things like the lift station and those types of things. What does that typically look like in cities?
So you may be able to speak directly to the impact of staff. What I will say is what we've done in other communities is if we come in and there's anybody that's displaced, they can come to our facility.
Is that guaranteed?
Guaranteed is a tough word for me.
I saw it in your presentation.
That's very, very typically what we've done in the past. I can't imagine why we wouldn't do that here. We don't want to displace anybody. There may be other things, though, that they're needed for that are beyond what's being done with the wastewater treatment system. And again, we don't have to immediately take over operations of your collection system. That could remain with the city for some time to facilitate whatever needs to happen with that. We can do that by agreement, but we don't have to. So not looking to displace anyone.
That makes sense.
Monty, do you want to expand on that while we're still on this topic?
So I don't think there will be an impact, a negative impact if this took place. I don't think there would be a displacement, because as we grow, we would need those bodies. I think someone mentioned tonight about the potholes, and we've got plenty of those to work around. So this kind of frees up some time if the I&I gets, radically fixed. That would free up, more opportunities for the guys to do other things and mow.
And we're still going to have our water,
Yeah.
as well.
You talked about the city would have control over rate increases, but that's really based on what your expenses are, right? Like when you present cities, so what control would we have over what your expenses are?
What you have is review control over that, and then the ability to question that, just like what the Public Utility Commission would do is, hey, why is this increase here? What is this for? Is that really necessary? So you have some control over it, but it's no different than if you owned your system. At the bottom line is the cost to operate is the cost to operate. Now, if we're trying to increase something that maybe seems out of line, you have the ability to question that and make us prove that up.
Along the lines of proving things up, you talked a little bit about your investor and how it's a different investor than the systems in Central Texas. If we were to move forward in talking about a contract, what due diligence would we be able to perform around the strength of the investor that provides your funds?
Yeah, we would definitely provide that information. You could do due diligence around who the investor is and their ability to perform. So typically what our investors are, I'll just give an example of this. The investor in BVR, the original BVRT, is a large utility company that doesn't do a lot of startup type stuff. And so they invested in all of the startup that happened in the BVRT company. The investor up here is a similar deal, but we would give specifics about that as we move forward. Absolutely. Here's the thing, again, I go back to, you guys have to feel comfortable with this. Like, we're going to be working jointly together. If we don't trust each other and we're not on the same page, it'll create conflicts that we don't want to see. So we want you to feel comfortable with everything that we're going to do. So.
And in your experience, you've talked a lot about the 3-mile radius and the MUDs using our services. In today's environment, cities don't necessarily have the ability to annex with places outside of city limits because using our services is kind of the carrot for that to happen. If they're already using the same services that we are, in your opinion, why would they want to annex with us?
So, a couple reasons. The rates outside the city can be different than what the city rates are. Sometimes can be a little bit higher. You typically are a little bit higher. The other reason that oftentimes the MUDs, so honestly, in my experience, when you start looking at MUDs and trying to get them to annex in, and I did this a lot when I was with the small community I was with, I really didn't want the rooftops. Rooftops very rarely pay for themselves in the services that the city needs. What I wanted was multifamily and commercial and industrial. And so oftentimes what I've done is worked with MUD developers that are coming into a community to say, let's separate your MUD out. Let's give the city these pieces. If there needs to be some other tax increment structuring to help with the infrastructure in that, we can discuss those things. But do what you have to do with the rooftops. Let the city collect the sales and property tax off of the multifamily, the commercial, and the industrial. And so that's been fairly successful. A lot of times MUDs they still want the community to succeed as well. It is, what I look for in all of that is do we have a carrot that we can give them? Because the carrot's obviously a much more effective most of the time than the stick is. Mm-hmm. And so that's a part of, I don't know where your community is related to this, and I'm not trying to say this is the way to go, but having incentive packages to bring people in can be very helpful to do that, as long as they don't negatively impact the community.
Ms. Myrick, I think that's a concern of mine also, because if someone in our ETJ gets a sewer bill from the city of Howe, they sometimes will assume that they should have fire and police protection and all of those things that go with that. So it could cause some confusion from citizens with the city staff on what exactly they're getting. So
I would suggest that what we would work on is any bills that are going outside the city limits would have a disclaimer on them saying this is simply a bill for the sewer service, not a statement of service. You are not in the city limits. We can put something on the billing for that. And we've done that in other communities.
You know, you talked about development and how it's important that commercial and industrial come in, and, you know, rooftops are important to be able to get that commercial and industrial and retail. But on the slide where you talked about future growth and being able to guarantee that you can scale up to meet that future growth, in this area it is, and I don't know what's going on in Austin and San Antonio, but the amount of industrial business that is likely headed this way, because we're 2 miles away from Texas Instruments, when you talk about being able to scale up at that rate, like, how far does that guarantee really go?
So the investor that we have has committed $500 million to the DFW area, and initially in the conversations we've had has made a willing commitment for $30 million in the Howe area. That's the start for that. So the commitment is there. Again, we want that growth just as much as you guys do. You guys get the tax money, we get the money off of the infrastructure that we put in to support that growth. So that is our growth potential as well.
So is that 30 million factored on 2024 or 2034?
Well, it's today, but that'll grow. This is going to grow. This is going to grow exponentially, I believe, in the Howe area. I mean, as you said earlier, there's people that are going to be knocking down the door the minute you guys have an announcement that you have a way to increase capacity, whether it's you guys doing it or us doing it. I would say that there's not a limit on what they're going to, if they spent the whole 500 million here and we're making money on it, they'd be happy to do that. I don't think that's going to be the case, but they're committed to trying to make this work in this area.
I think those are all my questions for now.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the questions.
I just want to make sure that the citizens are not going to be, not to use the word overtaxed, but
Sure.
I just want to make sure the citizens are protected rate-wise to where we're not looking 5 years, 10 years down the road at a decision that we possibly made that is going to hinder, this long term. I just want to make sure that, I know you touched on the PUC, and I just want to make sure that we are not making a decision that will affect our citizens long term.
Yeah, so I think maybe one of the things that might be beneficial is we can go back to some of our earlier plants and show you the progression of what the rates have done there, so you can see that it's really based on the growth of the plant and the increase. We have fixed costs at a plant, but we have variable costs with power, other things like that, and you can see where that's what's driving the increase. Again, there's not a profit margin in the operations. There's overhead in that, but there's not a profit margin in that.
And I do understand it's going to be a cost to the citizens, and I think the citizens probably understand that too. It's going to be paid for whether we go for bond and the tax rate goes up, or whether it's paid privately and it's in their sewer bill. I understand that. I just want to make sure that we do our due diligence.
So again, for us as being a part of the community, it's in our best interest to hold those rates the best that we can. I mean, again, there's cost to operate, but we want folks to come onto the plant. So we don't want to be the highest person around here. We want people to want to come onto that plant and to be a part of that. What that final number is, I don't know, because it'll have to be a rate study again, and it'll be based off the modeling and the cost of putting the infrastructure in.
So did you say BVRT formed in 2004?
BVRT1 was formed in 2013.
13.
Yeah.
So are those existing customers, has there been any contract that's been voided or terminated? Are they all still, okay.
Yeah, they're all still there. So occasionally what will happen with a plant is we may have a plant that goes in that starts off in a little bit smaller area. That plant may get decommissioned and turned into a lift station, but all the customers stay on that. We haven't had any customers leave or any communities leave that we've worked with.
I'll sit down now.
No, please, feel free. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Does the council, anybody else have questions that they want to ask, or anyone else from the public?
The city, we have right now 2 options. The city, number one, we share what we currently have. Number 2, we go with them. Have we explored any other companies or found any, good competitors that do the same thing?
It's a great question. So we're pretty unique in what we do. What most people do is they'll come build a plant for you, and they'll be a contract operator for you. And so you pay them a monthly bill to operate your plant that you now own. We're pretty unique in what we do with actually putting the infrastructure in and operating the plant.
If something goes wrong with it, it's yours.
It's ours, yeah. Yeah, so what I'm going to say this, and I'm not saying this to knock any operator company, okay? But what I see happen oftentimes with an operator company, as I said, there is no profit margin in operations. What happens a lot of times in operation systems for MUDs is that, because they'll do the same thing, they'll hire an operator. The operator has a base rate, and then there's all of the add-ons that come throughout the month that aren't part of the base rate, and all of a sudden that base rate is exponentially higher. With us, that's not the case because we're operating that plant. That's ours. It's part of all that operation cost.
But I'd like to clarify, one of our options is not to continue to do what we're doing.
That's true.
We can't do that because
That's what it is right now.
Well,
another option would be that we would do the lagoon, but we'd have to go out for a bond, and you can talk more about that if you want.
well, and that's a 5-year process
Right.
before we, that's a very long, I don't say long-term, but it's a longer-term solution. What I will say that's attractive towards this group and I think Jerry can probably attest to this, is that they deal with TCEQ. They handle all the permitting, and anything that goes wrong, the city of Howe is not liable with TCEQ, and that can be very challenging, and that can be a huge liability at times. So just having that burden off of our shoulders is pretty attractive. But again, we just need to make sound decisions on weigh everything.
That, what you're saying, and then just the cost of operating, like I said, how much you need, the samples, the lab equipment, the materials, the electricity, the fines you have to pay if something's going on, and the question of infrastructure is extremely costly.
And typically also what's happening in your small communities is your public works folks are being pulled in 27 different directions. They don't have a focus on the wastewater utility. And that's not knocking them at all. It's just the reality of what's happening. You're taking one hat off, putting another hat on every 20 minutes. And so what we do is we get focused on what we do well to free up, whether it's the developer or the city, to do what they do. And that's really the goal for us, is we are experts at this. Let us take this off your hands. Let us operate this. Let us handle all the permitting, the TCEQ stuff, and free you up to do the things that you do well in public works throughout the rest of the city, or with a private developer that they would do in their development.
And just so you know, Jerry back here in the corner that mentioned those things, he is actually in our Public Works Department. Yes, sir.
So y'all know that those cities, they service and that's how high they rate on.
Yes, I have.
I apologize, I couldn't hear.
And the city council, or anybody call other customers they service.
Yes, the city administrator has.
Okay, I might have missed that, I'm already here.
No, that's okay. Yeah, good question. Yeah.
One of the things I will throw out too, what we've done a lot with communities is they're kind of looking at what we do and how we do it. I would invite, you guys are welcome to come and take a tour of one of our plants, see what the operations look like, see what that is, see whether or not the plant smells, see all that stuff, say, so that you can say firsthand, I've seen it, I know what it is, and I see how it operates. We can't do it as a quorum, but we can figure out a way to do that so that any of you that would like to do that are welcome to come take a tour of that. So, I'm sorry, I didn't want to, I'll let her defer to her. So.
Go ahead, please.
Are there any cities that you work with already who sell their non-potable water?
Yeah, there's lots of cities that we work with that do that.
And do the cities benefit from it, or do you?
The city, it just depends on how it gets negotiated, but usually it's a joint share in that, yes. And so usually it takes a while before there's, you guys are in a little bit different situation, because usually when we're building plants, oftentimes there's not an existing collection system, and it takes a while for there to be output that would be of a capacity to sell. In this community, it's a little bit different, because really day one, when you hook up to the system, you're serving roughly 2,000 customers. So there's already the potential for that capacity. It's whether there's a need for that. So oftentimes what that ends up going to is some type of an industrial use or irrigation purposes, like with schools and things like that. So, but yeah, there's absolutely, we prefer to do that. That's what we look at, is that water is this whole regenerative process, and it should be used to its full life cycle and then recycled again. So.
Any other questions or comments?
What I would say about that too is I would anticipate, with the expansion that's going on with TI and the other things, that there will be other entities that are coming in looking for places to go that could use that reuse water.
One more question.
Sorry, y'all. So with this situation, you would essentially acquire our wastewater CCN for this, and how would that affect going north into someone else's CCN? Could they tap into this particular plant if they're not in our CCN?
So I think I understand your question. I'm going to probably answer this in a couple different ways. So yes, we would look to acquire the CCN and expand that for the areas that we serve. If what you're asking is, can we move north and move into another CCN, the answer is no. So CCNs are pretty crazy in the state of Texas. They actually override city limits.
Right.
So I've had a small city I was working with a while back with a large city next to them, and we were trying to look at sewer service for them, and the large city had a CCN that expanded into their city limits, not just ETJ, but their city limits. We had to try to negotiate the release of that for them to be able to take that on. So there can be negotiations in that. And I'm not saying this is a guarantee of any type, but there may be some places where, say, for instance, Sherman might say, hey, we don't want to serve this. We would give that up if somebody else was able to serve it.
I guess my concern is there's a lot of land between our city limits and the nearest industrial plant from Sherman, open space. And nothing says that Sherman and Sedco couldn't negotiate another Texas Instruments or some other fashion. And what I'd be concerned about is taking on that entire industrial into our wastewater treatment plant. We may not want that because of capacity issues. You guys might want that. And where's the line there when that happens?
Yeah, so that's all part of the negotiations that we do when we create a service agreement. But what I would say is, again, capacity is not going to be the issue. Like we'll be able to keep up with capacity, even if it's something like a TI or something, we would keep up with capacity. So we're never going to sacrifice the city of Howe on a capacity issue. That's just not going to be the way that BVRT2 operates.
Okay.
Jerry, do you have any other comments or questions, from? Okay. We have a couple of our engineers here tonight, too. Do you guys have any questions? And our attorneys here? Okay. Okay.
I have a question. Where does our boundary end and the Sherman boundary begin as far as city limits are concerned? Of how headed north, where do we run into conflict with Sherman?
Monty's probably going to be the better one to answer that than I would.
Well, it depends on where you're at on 902. At the intersection of 902 and 75, it goes past Tuffner, nearly to the horse barn. As you go west on 902, it shrinks down a little bit closer to 902, but that is the boundary.
Sure.
So going back to the guaranteed service fee.
Charge, yeah.
Charge, can that be seen, like, how does that compare to other development fees that they would get in a different city? Would this be like considered if not a developer can move because of the fees they have to pay?
So in most developers are paying some form of an impact fee already if they're going into a city. So it's a very comparable fee usually. We have to look at that and evaluate that here, but it's a very comparable fee usually. And if it's a developer that's doing a MUD, those fees are actually reimbursable back through their bonding process if they decide to do that, which usually the impact fees can be also, but so it's usually that they can get that back. So that's built into their lot price then when they're selling the lots. What you don't want to have happen though is lot prices to go skyrocketing and developers not be able to build and have affordable building plans. But
Another question. You talk about rates for existing customers, but I don't know if I heard you say anything about new customers that are on the system. What their rates are.
yeah, it would start out in that 85 to 95 range once we do this study. So it would not be held at what the current rate for the city is. It would actually be a slightly different rate. That's a good question, though. Very good question.
The rates would not increase for the current citizens until after
Correct.
5 years, till the
Correct.
5-year mark.
Yeah.
And then it would be a slow raise.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right? Okay. Just to clarify it.
Yep.
So our rates that we have here in the top, because we're connected to Sherman, does Sherman dictate our rates or does the city of Howe dictate our rates?
Monty, you want to answer that? But
Sorry, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat the question?
Because they're now connected to Sherman, are they the ones who determine our rates, or the city now determine?
So we have to do a rate study to see what we're sending out versus what we're charging, and we have to do that periodically to just study the amount of money we're paying Sherman, to be honest with you. So we determine our rates, but it's based on what we're sending them.
Which is really the same process I was talking about that we would go through as well. You're just doing it because you're paying a wholesale price to Sherman, so they've already factored in most of the other things into their cost, and then you're just seeing what your cost is to administer it. We would just be pulling all of what Sherman's doing into it as well to show that.
And just for transparency, things change, and I brought up the rainy day scenario. It's because rainy days kill us, because we have so much I&I that when it rains, that infiltration gets in the pipes, and a lot of times it's rainwater that's getting treated instead of wastewater. And so that situation in Howe is so bad. If that gets corrected, that'll certainly help out on some of these issues. But to be quite honest, if we go through a couple of months like we have, where there's very little rain, our bill to Sherman this month was $38,000. We can handle that every month, but when we have mass flooding and that bill goes up to $100,000 a month, then that's an issue, and it's hard to budget when you don't know whether it's going to rain or not. So that's how we factor in that overall period of annual I&I issues.
Are you looking at a flat rate on the new? Because I think the other rates are depends on how much water you use, right?
Yeah, we are. So what our studies around the state have shown us is that new houses, when they're built, have a different water usage than even what TCEQ says is the standard. It's much lower with all the low flow appliances, all of those kinds of things. So a flat rate actually makes sense in single family residential. It's yeah, it's
because if you water the lawn or
yeah.
fill your swimming pool, you're not.
There's virtually not much of a difference if you really look at in a new house, if you put it in based on usage versus a flat rate. So we just do a flat rate. It's simpler for everybody involved. Yep. Good question, though. Let me just say I really appreciate you guys having us here tonight. Happy to answer any questions. There's some phone numbers on the back of that. I can put some business cards up here also. You guys are welcome to call us and ask us questions. Please feel free also for you guys. I don't know what your policies are related to that, but happy to answer questions. I look at tonight, it's like kind of drinking from the fire hose a little bit, and so there's things that will come up over time, and we're happy to answer those and talk about those, and look forward to having more discussions and hopefully moving forward with you guys.
We really appreciate you coming out and giving the presentation, and I appreciate citizens, your participation in this as well.
I also just want to introduce Chris in the back here, Chris Mansky. He's one of our business development guys also. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to our action items. Number 3, discuss, consider, and act upon closing streets for the Christmas parade beginning at 4:15 p.m. The streets include Beatrice, Duke, Denny, Hanning, and King. And just for clarification, that is on December 14th, Saturday, December 14th. Does the council wish to discuss this item? And if not, do I have a motion to approve the closing of these streets?
Have we closed King in the past?
Yes, sir.
We have?
Yes, sir.
So how do we shut that down? Do we shut
It's
it
a
down?
closure of about an hour.
So do we just shut it down on Hanning, reroute everything where?
So the parade route starts at the middle school. It goes south on Beatrice,
Okay, so
left on Duke, all the way down Denny, which is Highway 5, turns right in front of the Baptist Church, goes through downtown off of Hughes, and then goes left on King back to the original starting point.
okay. I'll make a motion that we that we approve closing the streets for the parade.
Okay, Michael makes a motion to approve the closing of the streets for the parade. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Billy is making a second. All in favor, show of hands, please. Everyone, any opposed? None are opposed. Item number 4, discuss, consider, and act upon renewal of Grayson County Library contract. Does the council wish to discuss this item? And if not, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the contract.
Sarah makes a motion to approve the contract. Do I have a second?
I will second that one as well.
Billy makes a second. All in favor, show of hands, please. Everyone is in favor. Any opposed? None are opposed. Item number 5, discuss, consider, and act upon the final plat for Noble Ridge Phase 1B. Does the council wish to discuss this item? This was approved by the P&Z earlier this evening. And if not, if no discussion, do I have a motion?
Motion.
Ricky's going to make a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Sean makes a second. All in favor, show of hands, please. Everyone, any opposed? None are opposed. Executive session. The City Council will convene into closed session pursuant to the provisions of the Open Meetings Act, Chapter 551, Texas Government Code. Executive session as authorized by Texas Code, Section 551.071. Consultation with an attorney on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to the governmental body under the Texas disciplinary rules of professional conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter, Open Meetings Act. Texas Government Code, Section 551.072, deliberation regarding real property. Texas Government Code, Section 551.074, economic development. Discussion items are development matters, pending litigation. The council will now go into executive session, and the time is 7:34 p.m. If anyone is staying and you need to use the restroom, we'll wait so you can use it. Okay. The council will now reconvene into open session. The time is 9:06 p.m. Sorry, did you say, okay. All right, we discuss, consider, and act upon any items, if needed, discussed in executive session. No action is taken. If there is no further business to come before this council, this meeting stands adjourned at 9:07 p.m. Have a good night.